the sound of Jessica. Hamilton's heels clicking rapidly across the marble floor of the 52nd floor executive suite echoed like gunshots in the morning silence. Her perfectly pressed blazer was wrinkled, her usually immaculate blonde hair showed signs of stress-induced tugging. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched a resignation letter that had been 3 months in the making. "Mr. Cross, I need to speak with you immediately," Jessica announced as she burst through the doors of the corner office without knocking. A breach of protocol that would have been unthinkable just 24 hours earlier. Damien Cross didn't look up from his array of monitors displaying real-time stock prices, quarterly projections, and global market analyses. His dark hair was perfectly styled despite the early hour, his charcoal suit pressed to perfection. His steel blue eyes remained fixed on the screens as his fingers flew across multiple keyboards with mechanical precision. "You're 17 minutes late, Hamilton. The Yamamoto presentation needed to be revised by 7:30, and I specifically requested the Singapore contracts be prioritized above all other correspondence." His voice carried the cold authority that had built Crosstech Industries from a garage startup into a $20 billion empire in just 8 years. Jessica's jaw tightened. For 93 days, she had endured his impossible demands. His complete lack of appreciation and his treatment of her as nothing more than an extension of his computer systems. She placed the resignation letter on his desk with more force than necessary. "I quit." The typing stopped. Slowly, Damien turned in his leather chair, his expression shifting from mild annoyance to something resembling surprise. Very few people had ever spoken to him with such finality, and even fewer had walked away from the generous salary he provided. "Excuse me, you heard me perfectly. I resign from my position as your executive assistant, effective immediately." Jessica's voice grew stronger with each word, years of suppressed frustration finally finding their voice. "I have worked for demanding executives before, but you don't want an assistant, Mr. Cross. You want a mind-reading robot who operates on 3 hours of sleep and has no life outside these walls." Damien's eyes narrowed. "Your contract specifies a 2-week notice. Period, sue me." Jessica turned toward the door, then paused. "Good luck finding someone who can tolerate your impossible standards and complete lack of basic human decency. Though I doubt such a person exists." The door closed behind her with a decisive click, leaving Damien alone in his pristine office, overlooking the Manhattan skyline. He stared at the resignation letter for several long moments before crumpling it into a ball and tossing it toward the wastebasket. Missed. Chapter 2. 3 weeks later, Sophia Chen Martinez sat across from Damien in the Crosstech conference room. A stack of resumes spread between them like casualties of war. As the company's director of human resources, she had personally interviewed 47 candidates for the executive assistant position. 47 had either walked out mid-interview or been dismissed within days of hiring. The Pemberton woman lasted 6 hours, Sophia reported, consulting her notes. She cited unreasonable expectations and hostile work environment in her exit interview. "She couldn't operate the phone system properly," Damien replied, not looking up from his tablet. "How can I trust someone with confidential client information if they can't manage basic office equipment?" Sophia rubbed her temples, feeling a headache building. The phone system requires 17 different protocols depending on the type of call. Most people need at least a week to master it. Then most people aren't qualified for this position. Damien and Sophia leaned forward, dropping the professional formality they usually maintained. "We've known each other for 5 years. I helped build this company's HR department from nothing. In all that time, I've never seen you this impossible to work with." Jessica was actually quite good at her job. Jessica was adequate. Jessica worked 14-hour days, managed your entire professional and personal calendar, handled correspondence with heads of state, never once complained about your habit of changing priorities every 30 minutes. Sophia's voice carried a warning edge. She was exceptional, and you drove her away because you refused to treat your assistants like human beings. Damien finally looked up, his expression unreadable. "You have another candidate or not?" Sophia sighed and reached for the final folder in her stack. "One more. Ruby Sinclair. She's unconventional." Define unconventional. Former marketing executive at Sterling and Associates. Quit 6 months ago under mysterious circumstances. It's excellent references, though they all mention she has strong opinions and doesn't follow traditional protocols. Sophia paused. She specifically requested to interview with you directly rather than going through the standard HR screening. She requested to interview with me. Damien's eyebrow arched slightly. I don't interview assistants. She said to tell you that anyone who can't handle 5 minutes with their potential boss isn't worth hiring. And any boss who can't spare 5 minutes to meet their assistant doesn't deserve competent help. For the first time in weeks, something resembling interest flickered across Damien's features. When can she be here? She's actually waiting outside, has been for the past hour. Send her in. Chapter 3. Ruby Sinclair was not what Damien Cross expected. Instead of the precisely groomed professional he was accustomed to, a woman with wild, auburn hair barely contained in a messy bun walked through his office doors. Wearing a navy blazer over dark jeans and boots that had clearly seen better days, her green eyes surveyed his office with curiosity rather than intimidation. And she carried herself with a confidence that seemed utterly unconcerned with his reputation or wealth. Mr. Cross. She didn't extend her hand or wait for permission. To speak? I'm Ruby Sinclair. I understand you need an assistant who can actually do the job. Miss Sinclair. Damien gestured to the chair across from his desk. Please, sit. Ruby remained standing, her hands clasped behind her back, as she continued to examine his office. Impressive setup. 6 monitors, 3 phone lines, and enough technology to run a small country. I assume the previous assistants were overwhelmed by the complexity, among other issues, such as the directness of her question caught him off guard. Most candidates spent interviews trying to impress him with their qualifications and eagerness to please. They lacked the necessary skills to manage a position of this scope and responsibility. Ruby turned to face him fully, her expression skeptical. Or you're impossible to work for and drive away competent people with unrealistic expectations and poor communication? The silence that followed was profound. Damien stared at her, uncertain whether to be insulted or intrigued. No one had ever spoken to him with such blunt honesty during a professional interaction. That's an interesting assessment from someone who knows nothing about my management style. I know you've gone through 4 assistants in 3 months. No, your last assistant was considered one of the best in the city before she worked here. And I know you have a reputation in the industry for being brilliant but difficult. Ruby shrugged. Basic research. And yet you're here. I'm here because difficult people often achieve extraordinary things, and I prefer working with extraordinary people over mediocre ones. The question is whether you actually want an assistant or just another person to intimidate. Damien leaned back in his chair, studying her carefully. Her confidence was refreshing, even if her appearance was unconventional. What makes you think you can handle this position when others have failed? Because I'm not trying to be your perfect little helper. I'm trying to be effective.
Right.
Ruby finally sat down, crossing her legs casually. Your previous assistants probably spent so much energy trying to anticipate your every need that they forgot to actually organize your work efficiently. They were managing you instead of managing your schedule, and your approach would be different. My approach would be to treat you like a client instead of a dictator. You tell me what needs to be accomplished. I figure out the most efficient way to make it happen. And I keep you informed of progress without requiring constant approval for every decision. Ruby's eyes met his directly. Hold my hand, and I don't expect you to sugarcoat your feedback. But I also won't tolerate being treated like disposable equipment. The honesty in her statement was both refreshing and challenging. Damien had grown accustomed to people who bent to his will without question, who absorbed his demands without pushback. Ruby Sinclair represented something entirely different. When can you start? Ruby smiled for the first time since entering his office, transforming her face completely. Tomorrow morning, 7:30 sharp, and Mr. Cross. I take my coffee black. I don't run personal errands unless they're time sensitive, and if you yell at me, I'll yell back. We clear? Crystal clear, Miss Sinclair? As she left his office, Damien realized he was looking forward to tomorrow morning for the first time in months. Ruby Sinclair was going to be either the best assistant he'd ever had or the most spectacular. Disaster in Crosstech's corporate history. He suspected it might be both. Ruby's first week at Crosstech Industries redefined everything Damien thought he knew about executive assistants. Instead of the meticulous scheduling system Jessica had maintained, Ruby operated with what appeared to be controlled chaos. The desk was covered with sticky notes in multiple colors. 3 different notebooks filled with cryptic abbreviations, and a coffee mug that seemed permanently attached to her right hand. Yet somehow, miraculously, everything worked. Your 11 o'clock with the Henderson Group has been moved to 2:15. Ruby announced without looking up from her computer screen as Damien emerged from his office Tuesday morning. I convinced them to come here instead of making you trek across town. I ordered lunch from that Mediterranean place you actually like, instead of the pretentious French restaurant they suggested. How did you know I prefer Mediterranean food? You've ordered from Nico's Corner 12 times in the past month according to your credit card statements, which I reviewed to understand your preferences. Ruby finally glanced up, her green eyes bright with satisfaction. Also, you ate the entire container of hummus I saw delivered here yesterday, so that was a pretty solid clue. Damien paused in adjusting his tie. No previous assistant had taken the initiative to study his personal habits so thoroughly. You reviewed my credit card statements? With appropriate security clearance from Sophia, obviously? How else am I supposed to efficiently manage your schedule and preferences? Ruby stood up, grabbing a folder from her desk. Speaking of which, your 3:30 with the Tokyo investors needs to be rescheduled. The presentation you want to show them isn't ready yet. That presentation was finalized yesterday. The financial projections were finalized. The presentation is boring corporate nonsense that will put them to sleep. Ruby handed him the folder. I took the liberty of reviewing your materials and creating something that will actually engage them. Damien opened the folder to find a completely redesigned presentation. Where his original version had been filled with dense charts and technical specifications, Ruby's version told a story. The same information was presented through compelling visuals, real-world applications, and clear benefits to potential investors. You redesigned my entire presentation without authorization? I improved your presentation without being asked, which is what you're paying me to do. Ruby crossed her arms, her chin lifting slightly in challenge. Bless you prefer the version that makes your revolutionary technology sound like a tax preparation software demonstration. Materials more carefully. The content was not only more engaging, but more strategically organized. Ruby had highlighted aspects of the technology that would specifically appeal to Japanese investors, incorporating cultural considerations he hadn't even thought about. How do you know what appeals to Japanese business culture? I spent 2 years working on international marketing campaigns at Sterling and Associates. Different cultures respond to different presentation styles and value different aspects of business relationships. Ruby's voice carried a note of professional pride. Original presentation focused entirely on profits and efficiency. This version emphasizes innovation, partnership, and long-term vision, which resonates much more strongly with traditional Japanese business philosophy. For the first time since Ruby had started working for him, Damien felt genuinely impressed. This is exceptional work. I know. Ruby's smile was confident rather than modest. So can I reschedule the 3:30 to give you time to review the new materials properly? Yes, and Ruby. Damien paused at the door to his office. Good work. The smile that spread across her face was radiant, and Damien found himself momentarily distracted by how it transformed her entire appearance. There was something about Ruby Sinclair that he couldn't quite categorize, and it was beginning to intrigue him more than he cared to admit. Chapter 5. By the end of her second week, Ruby had revolutionized not just Damien's schedule, but the entire executive floor's workflow. She had implemented a color-coded priority system that somehow made sense to everyone except Damien, established direct communication lines with department heads that bypassed 3 layers of middle management, and instituted what she called reality check meetings where people could actually tell Damien when his requests were unrealistic. Your 4 o'clock wants to discuss the quarterly budget projections, Ruby announced, poking her head into his office. But the CFO is running 20 minutes behind because accounting discovered a discrepancy that needs immediate attention. Then, we'll wait 20 minutes. Or you could use that time to review the Morrison contract revisions that have been sitting on your desk for 3 days, while you've been obsessing over projections that won't change regardless of how many times you analyze them. Ruby stepped fully into his office, her expression serious. Sometimes the most productive thing you can do is stop micromanaging and trust your team to handle their responsibilities. Damien looked up from his computer screen, irritation flashing in his blue eyes. I don't micromanage, he requested. Daily reports from 6 different departments. Personally approved 3 purchases under $50. Spent an hour yesterday debating the font choice for internal memos. Ruby's tone was matter-of-fact rather than accusatory. That's the definition of micromanaging. Those details matter. Some details matter. Others are just anxiety displacement. Ruby moved closer to his desk, her voice gentling slightly. You're brilliant at strategy and vision, Damien. You're terrible at delegation and trust. The combination is exhausting for everyone around you. The use of his first name surprised him. Ruby had maintained professional formality since her first day, never presuming the familiarity that others in his circle took for granted. Hearing her say his name carried an unexpected intimacy. You think I don't trust my employees? I think you don't trust anyone, period, including yourself. Ruby perched on the edge of his desk, a casual breach of protocol that somehow didn't annoy him. When was the last time you made a decision and didn't second-guess it 17 different ways? The question hit uncomfortably close to home. Damien had built his success on careful analysis and risk mitigation, but lately, even his most confident decisions felt uncertain. Strategic thinking requires thorough consideration of all variables. Strategic thinking requires confidence in your judgment and trust in your team's abilities to execute your vision. Ruby's green eyes studied his face intently. You have good instincts, Damien. You just don't trust them anymore. And what makes you think you understand my instincts? As I've been watching you for 2 weeks? You make the right call every time, then spend hours trying to convince yourself you're wrong. Ruby slid off his desk and headed toward the door. The Morrison contract revisions are solid. Prove them and move on. Your 4 o'clock can wait 20 minutes without the world ending. After she left, Damien sat in his office staring at the Morrison contract. Ruby was right. The revisions were exactly what he wanted, and he had been overthinking the decision. He signed the documents with more confidence than he had felt in months. Chapter 6. The crisis came on a Thursday morning in the form of Trevor Nash bursting into Damien's office with panic written across his usually calm features. Crosstech's co-founder and head of strategic partnerships. Trevor had seen the company through numerous challenges, but the expression on his face suggested this was different. We have a problem, Trevor announced, closing the door behind him. A big one. Before Damien could respond, Ruby appeared in the doorway. The Yamamoto deal? Trevor's surprise was evident. How did you know? Because 3 executives from their New York office have been trying to reach Damien since 6 this morning. There's been unusual activity in Crosstech stock prices. And someone from the Wall Street Journal left a very cryptic voicemail about market concerns. Ruby stepped into the office, closing the door behind her. What happened? Damien looked between his business partner and his assistant, realizing that Ruby had been monitoring situations he hadn't even been aware of. What's the situation, Trevor? Yamamoto Industries is pulling out of the partnership. Completely. They're claiming our technology doesn't meet their specifications, and they're concerned about our long-term stability. Trevor ran his hands through his hair, a gesture Damien recognized as extreme stress. If this deal falls through, we lose our entire Asian market expansion, 3 major contracts, and about 40% of our projected revenue for the next 2 years. The implications hit Damien immediately. Crosstech had invested heavily in the Yamamoto partnership, restructuring entire departments and committing resources that couldn't easily be redirected. Losing the deal wouldn't destroy the company, but it would set them back significantly and damage their reputation in international markets. What's their specific complaint about the technology? That's just it. There isn't a specific complaint. Their concerns are vague and don't align with any of the technical specifications we've discussed over the past 8 months. Trevor's frustration was evident. It feels like they're looking for an excuse to back out. Ruby had been listening intently, her expression thoughtful. May I see the communication from their team? Trevor glanced at Damien, who nodded. Within minutes, Ruby was reviewing emails, contract negotiations, and technical specifications with the focused intensity Damien recognized from their presentation work. This isn't about technology concerns, Ruby announced after 20 minutes of silence. This is about saving face. Explain. Look at the timeline. 8 months ago, Yamamoto committed to this partnership when Crosstech was a smaller company, with less market presence. Since then, you've grown significantly, taken on major clients, and become a serious competitor in markets where Yamamoto has traditionally dominated. Ruby spread the documents across Damien's conference table. They're not backing out because your technology is inadequate. They're backing out because it's too good. Trevor leaned forward. But they can't just break the contract without cause. They're not breaking it. They're forcing you to break it by creating impossible conditions. Ruby pointed to specific clauses. In their agreement, notice how all their recent concerns focus on areas where they have subjective evaluation rights. They're positioning themselves to claim Crosstech failed to meet standards while technically staying within the contract terms. Damien studied the pattern Ruby had identified. She was right. Yamamoto was systematically creating a paper trail. That would allow them to exit the partnership while placing the blame on Crosstech. So how do we fight it? Ruby's smile was sharp and calculating. We don't fight it. We beat them at their own game. Chapter 7. What followed was the most intense. 3 days of Damien's professional career. Under Ruby's strategic guidance, Crosstech launched a comprehensive campaign that simultaneously protected their reputation, turved their legal position, and turned Yamamoto's tactics against them. Ruby worked 18-hour days, coordinating, with legal teams managing communications with financial analysts, somehow maintaining normal office operations while orchestrating a complex corporate chess match. She slept in her office, survived on coffee and determination, and demonstrated a level of strategic thinking that rivaled Damien's own abilities. The journal piece will run tomorrow morning, Ruby reported during their emergency strategy meeting. Friday evening, I convinced them to frame it as a story about innovative American companies facing unfair competition from established international corporations rather than a crisis story about Crosstech specifically. How did you manage that? Trevor asked, his admiration evident. Because it's a better story, and journalists like better stories. David versus Goliath sells more papers than local company fails to meet expectations. Ruby consulted her notes. I also arranged for 3 of your other major clients to provide quotes about Crosstech's reliability and innovation. Nothing defensive, just positive statements about their experiences working with the company. Damien had watched Ruby orchestrate this campaign with growing amazement. Her strategic thinking was sophisticated, her execution was flawless, and her ability to manage multiple complex moving parts simultaneously was extraordinary. What about the legal situation? Yamamoto's lawyers are good, but they made one crucial mistake. When they started raising technical concerns, they opened the door for independent verification. Ruby's eyes sparkled with satisfaction. I arranged for MIT's engineering department to conduct a third-party evaluation of Crosstech's technology against Yamamoto's stated requirements. The results will be available Monday morning. You got MIT involved in this? I got Professor David Chen involved? He's one of the leading experts in your field. He has no financial connection to either company, and he's highly respected in both American and Japanese academic circles. Ruby leaned back in her chair, exhaustion finally showing in her posture. When MIT confirms that your technology not only meets but exceeds all specified requirements, Yamamoto's position becomes indefensible. Trevor whistled low. That's brilliant. That's just the beginning. Ruby's smile turned predatory, because while they've been focused on discrediting Crosstech, I've been building relationships with 3 other major Japanese corporations who are very interested in the partnership Yamamoto is abandoning. Turns out, corporate loyalty has limits when a competitor is walking away from superior technology. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Ruby hadn't just defended Crosstech against Yamamoto's attack, she had positioned them to emerge stronger than before. Ruby, Damien's voice carried a note of awe he rarely allowed himself to express. This is exceptional work. This is my job. But her smile revealed how much his approval meant to her, though I have to admit, it's the most interesting job I've ever had. As Trevor left for the evening, Damien found himself alone with Ruby. In his office for the first time since her hiring, the adrenaline of crisis management was fading, replaced by something more complex and personal. You could have told me about your background in strategic communications, Damien said quietly. Ruby looked up from organizing her notes. You didn't ask. Most assistants don't have experience managing corporate crises. Most assistants aren't. Former marketing executives who specialized in reputation management and competitive strategy, Ruby met his gaze directly. I told you I wasn't trying to be your perfect little helper. I told you I was trying to be effective. You could be running your own company with these skills. Something flickered across Ruby's expression. Pain, regret, or perhaps both. I tried that once. It didn't work out the way I planned. The vulnerability in her admission surprised him. Throughout their professional relationship, Ruby had projected confidence and competence without revealing anything personal about her. Motivations or background. What happened? Ruby was quiet for a long moment, her fingers absently straightening papers that didn't need straightening. Sometimes being right isn't enough. Sometimes the people you trust most are the ones who betray you. The raw honesty in her voice touched something deep in Damien's chest. He recognized the tone. It was the same one he heard in his own voice when he talked about trust and vulnerability. I'm sorry, don't be. It taught me valuable lessons about reading people and protecting myself. Ruby's smile returned, but it was softer than her usual confident expression. It also taught me to appreciate employers who value competence over politics. Is that what I do? It's what you try to do. Whether you succeed depends on whether you can learn to trust the competent people you hire. They looked at each other across his desk, and Damien realized that somewhere in the past 3 weeks, his feelings about Ruby Sinclair had evolved beyond professional appreciation. She intrigued him, challenged him, and made him want to be better. At the very things she had identified as his weaknesses, Ruby, he began, then stopped, uncertain how to articulate what he was feeling. I should head home, Ruby said, gathering her belongings. Tomorrow's going to be intense. As she reached the door, Damien found his voice. Ruby, thank you for everything. She turned back, her green eyes warm with an emotion he couldn't quite identify. You're welcome, Damien. See you tomorrow. After she left, Damien sat alone in his office. Realizing that for the first time in his adult life, he was genuinely curious about someone else's story. Ruby Sinclair had secrets, and he found himself wanting to know all of them. The Yamamoto. Crisis resolution made Ruby something of a legend within Crosstech Industries. The MIT evaluation had been even more favorable than expected. 2 of the Japanese corporations she had contacted had expressed serious interest in partnerships. And the Wall Street Journal article had positioned Crosstech as an innovative American success story rather than a company in crisis. But success brought new challenges. And by the following week, Ruby found herself managing not just Damien's schedule, but coordinating with legal teams, investment banks, and international business development specialists as Crosstech navigated its rapid growth. The Singapore expansion meeting needs to be moved to Thursday. Ruby announced as she entered Damien's office Monday morning with her customary coffee and stack of prioritized messages. The preliminary contracts arrived, and they're more complex than anticipated. How complex? Complex enough that Trevor thinks we should bring in specialized international business lawyers. Ruby set his coffee on his desk and handed him the relevant documents. Also, your mother called. Damien's hand froze halfway to his coffee cup. My mother called here? She called your personal line, which I answer according to your instructions? She wants to schedule lunch to discuss something important. Gosh, Ruby's expression was carefully neutral. I told her I'd check your availability and get back to her. The relationship between Damien and his mother, Helena, was complicated at best. She had supported his business ventures financially in the early days. But their personal relationship had been strained since his father's death 5 years earlier. Helena disapproved of Damien's workaholic tendencies and his habit of using business success to avoid dealing with emotional issues. What did she sound like? Concerned and determined. Ruby consulted her notes. She specifically asked about your health and whether you were taking care of yourself properly. She asks that every time we speak. When was the last time you spoke? Couldn't remember. His communication with his mother had devolved into brief text messages and holiday phone calls over the past 2 years. Schedule lunch for Friday. Somewhere public, but quiet. Already done? Meridian Restaurant, 12:30. Private dining room. Ruby's efficiency continued to amaze him. She also mentioned that she's looking forward to meeting me. Meeting you, apparently? She's heard about my work during the Yamamoto situation. She said she's curious about the woman who finally figured out how to manage her impossible son. Ruby's smile was teasing rather than critical. I assured her that you're only moderately impossible. Despite his concerns about his mother's agenda, Damien found himself smiling. Ruby's ability to find humor in his character flaws was both refreshing and oddly comforting. So like you, most mothers do. I'm excellent with parents. It's even difficult ones, especially difficult ones. Difficult people usually have good reasons for being difficult. Ruby headed toward the door, then paused. Besides, anyone who raised someone capable of building this company from nothing can't be entirely unreasonable. After she left, Damien found himself thinking about Ruby's comment. She had a gift for seeing potential in people and situations that others found challenging. It was one of the qualities that made her so effective as an assistant and so intriguing as a person. Chapter 9. Helena Cross was elegance personified. At 58, she maintained the poise and sophistication that had made her a formidable presence. In New York society for 3 decades, her silver hair was perfectly styled, her black designer suit was impeccable, and her blue eyes, so similar to her son's, missed nothing. Ruby had arrived at Meridian Restaurant 15 minutes early. To ensure everything was properly arranged, she had learned that managing Damien effectively meant anticipating complications before they arose. The family meetings definitely qualified as potential complications. Ms. Sinclair? Helena's voice carried the cultured tones of old money and excellent education. I'm Helena Cross. Thank you for arranging this lunch. Mrs. Cross, it's a pleasure to meet you. Ruby stood to shake hands, noting the older woman's firm grip and assessing gaze. Damien should arrive any moment. He's just finishing a conference call with the Singapore team. Of course he is. Helena's smile was fond but exasperated. My son has never been early for a personal appointment in his life, but he's never missed a business obligation. He's very dedicated to the company. He's obsessed with the company. Helena settled into her chair, studying Ruby with the same intensity her son often displayed. Though I understand things have been running more smoothly since you joined his staff, we've found a good working rhythm, so I've heard. Trevor Nash speaks very highly of your strategic thinking. Sophia Chen Martinez tells me you've revolutionized the executive floor's operations. Helena's tone was casual, but Ruby recognized the careful information gathering. Tell me, what's your assessment of my son's management style? The question was more loaded than it appeared. Ruby could sense that Helena was seeking specific information. Though her motivations weren't entirely clear, Amin is brilliant, dedicated, and demanding. He has exceptional strategic vision and the ability to inspire people to achieve more than they thought possible.
Oh.
Ruby chose her words carefully. He also tends to take on more responsibility than necessary and has difficulty delegating effectively. A diplomatic way of saying he's a perfectionist control freak who doesn't trust anyone. Ruby's laugh was genuine. I wouldn't have phrased it quite so directly, but you clearly know your son well. I raised him. I also watched him retreat further into his work after his father died. Helena's expression grew serious. James always worried that Damien would sacrifice everything personal for professional success. He was proud of his son's achievements, but he wanted him to have a full life. The conversation was interrupted by Damien's arrival, though Ruby noticed he looked more tense than usual. Family interactions clearly affected him differently than business meetings. He kissed Helena's cheek before taking his seat. I apologize for the delay. Singapore called, I assume. How did you know? Helena gestured toward Ruby. Your assistant is very thorough, she explained. You were handling international business. Helena's tone carried a subtle reproach. Though I notice you didn't think to mention your recent corporate crisis when we spoke last month. Damien glanced at Ruby, who kept her expression neutral. The situation was resolved quickly and successfully, thanks to Ms. Sinclair's expertise from what I understand. Helena turned to Ruby. I'm curious about your background, dear. Strategic communications and crisis management aren't typical qualifications for an executive assistant position. Ruby felt both Cross family members watching her intently, though for different reasons. I have a diverse professional background. I find that variety helps me approach challenges from multiple angles. Ruby prefers not to discuss her previous work in detail, Damien said, and Ruby noticed the subtle protectiveness in his tone.
I understand the desire for privacy,
Helena said smoothly. Though I hope you'll both humor an old woman's curiosity. I'm having a small dinner party next Saturday evening. Nothing formal, just a few close friends. I'd love for both of you to attend. The invitation clearly surprised Damien. Mother, I don't think it would be a pleasure, Ruby interrupted, earning a sharp look from her employer. Though I should mention that I'm just Damien's assistant. I'm not sure a work dinner party is appropriate. Helena's smile was knowing. My dear, anyone who can manage my son's professional life this effectively is far more than just an assistant. Besides, I'm curious to meet the woman who finally figured out how to make him smile at work. I don't smile at work, Damien protested. You're smiling right now, Ruby pointed out. As lunch progressed, Ruby found herself genuinely enjoying Helena's company. The older woman was intelligent, witty, and clearly devoted to her son, despite their complicated relationship. She was also obviously trying to assess Ruby's role in Damien's life beyond their professional arrangement. When Helena excused herself briefly, Damien turned to Ruby with a concerned expression. You don't have to attend her dinner party. My mother can be overwhelming in social situations. I like your mother. She's concerned about your well-being and curious about the people in your life. Those are positive qualities. She's matchmaking. Ruby's heart skipped slightly at the bluntness of his statement. Is that a problem? It's presumptuous. Our relationship is professional. Of course it is. Ruby kept her voice steady, though something in her chest tightened at his emphasis on their professional boundaries. Though there's nothing wrong with attending a social event with a colleague, when Helena returned, she seemed satisfied with whatever conclusion she had reached during their brief separation. Saturday evening then, 8 o'clock, please, both of you, try to relax and enjoy yourselves. And life is too short to spend every moment focused on business. Chapter 10. The week leading up to Helena's dinner party brought unexpected complications. In the form of Crosstech's most significant business opportunity to date, a consortium of European investors had expressed interest in forming a partnership that would expand the company's operations globally and potentially triple its valuation within 2 years. The preliminary meeting is scheduled for Monday, Trevor announced during their Friday afternoon strategy session. They want comprehensive presentations on our technology, financial projections, operational capabilities, and long-term vision. How comprehensive? Ruby asked, already taking notes. Everything. Complete technical specifications, 5-year business, plans, detailed market analysis, and executive team evaluations. Trevor's excitement was evident despite the workload implications. If we can convince them we're ready for this level of expansion, Crosstech becomes a major international player overnight. Damien studied the requirements list, his expression thoughtful. This is going to require coordinating input from every department and creating materials that demonstrate both our current capabilities and our growth potential. Over a weekend, Ruby added dryly. While attending your mother's dinner party tomorrow evening, you should skip the party, Damien said immediately. This presentation is more important. Actually, the party might be exactly what you need. Ruby's tone was thoughtful rather than argumentative. You've been working 18-hour days for 2 weeks? Your strategic thinking improves when you're relaxed. And you haven't been relaxed in months. I don't have time to be relaxed. You don't have time not to be. Burned-out executives make poor decisions, and this opportunity is too important for poor decisions. Ruby stood up, her expression determined. We're going to the party. We're going to have a pleasant evening with your mother and her friends. And then we're going to spend Sunday creating a presentation that wins this deal. Trevor grinned. I like her confidence. I like her optimism, Damien replied. I'm less sure about her timeline. But as Ruby began outlining her plans for managing both the social obligation and the business crisis, Damien found himself trusting her judgment once again. She had yet to steer him wrong, even when her methods seemed unconventional. Chapter 11. Helena Cross's dinner party was exactly the elegant, intimate gathering she had described. 12 guests enjoyed cocktails and conversation in her beautifully appointed Upper East Side townhouse. The atmosphere sophisticated but relaxed. Ruby had chosen a simple black dress that was appropriate for the occasion without being overly formal. She found herself genuinely enjoying the company. Damien, however, seemed uncomfortable with the social demands of the evening. He participated in conversations, but remained somewhat distant. His attention clearly divided between the present company and his business concerns. He's thinking about work, Helena observed quietly as she and Ruby stepped onto the terrace for air. The European investment opportunity. It's a significant deal that could transform the company. Everything is always transforming the company with Damien, There's always another deal, another crisis, another opportunity that requires his complete attention. Helena's tone carried years of frustration. When his father was alive, James could convince him to take breaks, to remember there were things in life beyond business success. Ruby watched Damien through the terrace doors, noting the tension in his shoulders and the way he kept checking his phone. Despite the social setting, he cares deeply about the company and the people who work for him. That level of responsibility is difficult to set aside. Cares about control and achievement. There's a difference. Helena's voice was gentle but firm. Don't misunderstand me. I'm proud of what he's accomplished, but I'm concerned about what he's sacrificed to achieve it. What do you mean, relationships? Joy. The ability to be present in moments that matter. Helena turned to face Ruby directly. He likes you, you know. It's more than he's liked anyone in years. Ruby's heart rate increased despite her attempt to remain composed. We work well together professionally. My dear, I've been watching people navigate relationships for 60 years. What I see between you and my son goes well beyond professional compatibility. Helena's smile was knowing. The question is what you intend to do about it. Before Ruby could respond, they were interrupted by Marco Rivera, Crosstech's head of security, appearing on the terrace with obvious urgency. Ms. Sinclair, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's been a development regarding Monday's presentation. Ruby immediately shifted into crisis management mode. What kind of development? Someone leaked details about the European investment opportunity to TechCrunch. The story goes live in 30 minutes, and it includes information that wasn't supposed to be public until after Monday's meeting. The implications hit Ruby immediately. If their competitors knew about the European deal, they could undermine Crosstech's position or make competing offers to the investors. The leak could destroy their opportunity before the presentation even took place. Where's Damien? Inside, talking to Trevor on the phone. They're both pretty upset. Ruby found Damien in Helena's study, his expression grim as he ended his call. Bad, is it? She asked immediately. Bad. The article includes specific details about the investors, the proposed partnership structure, and our projected valuations. Either someone with high-level access leaked information deliberately, or our security protocols have been compromised. Damien's voice was tightly controlled. Either scenario is problematic. What's our response strategy? Trevor's coordinating with legal and public relations. We're going to issue a statement confirming the partnership discussions, while emphasizing that no agreements have been finalized. Damien ran his hands through his hair, a gesture Ruby recognized as extreme stress. But the damage may already be done. If the Europeans think we can't maintain confidentiality, they'll walk away from the deal. Ruby studied his face, noting the exhaustion and frustration that went beyond this immediate crisis. Damien was approaching burnout, and the stress of constant crisis management was taking a visible toll. We need to leave, she said quietly. Yes, there's too much to coordinate to stay at a social event. No, I mean we need to leave New York tonight. Damien stared at her as if she had suggested something insane. Ruby, we're in the middle of a crisis. We're in the middle of a crisis that other people are handling while you micromanage from your mother's living room. Ruby's tone was firm, but gentle. You're exhausted, stressed, and making emotional decisions instead of strategic ones. You need perspective, and you can't get perspective from your office. Where exactly do you propose we go? Ruby smiled, her expression confident despite the chaos surrounding them. My family has a cabin in the Adirondacks. 2 hours north, completely isolated. No cell service except for emergencies. We're going to spend tomorrow creating the best presentation of your career, and we're going to do it without the distractions that are clouding your judgment. That's insane. That's inspired. Trust me, Damien. Wait. When have my unconventional methods let you down? He looked at her for a long moment, and Ruby could see him weighing his instincts against his need for control. Finally, he nodded. One night. We leave first thing in the morning if this doesn't work. Deal. As they prepared to leave the party, Helena caught Ruby's arm gently. Take care of him, she said quietly. He needs someone who can help him remember there's more to life than just work. I'll do my best. I think you'll do more than that. I think you might be exactly what he needs. Chapter 12. The cabin was everything Ruby had promised. A rustic, but comfortable retreat nestled among towering pines beside a pristine lake. The silence was profound after the constant noise of Manhattan, and Damien found himself genuinely relaxing for the first time in months. They had driven north in Ruby's car, stopping for supplies and arriving just as the sun was setting over the water. The simple act of preparing dinner together in the cabin's small kitchen felt surprisingly natural, their professional dynamic shifting into something more personal and intimate.
Ow!
"This is where you grew up?" Damien asked as they sat on the porch. After dinner, watching stars emerge in the clear mountain sky, summers, mostly. "My grandparents built this place in the 1960s, and my family spent every vacation here until I was in college." Ruby's voice carried warm memories. "It's where I learned to think clearly and solve problems creatively. It's beautiful. It's peaceful. Sometimes that's more valuable than beautiful." They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, the stress of the day fading in the tranquil surroundings. Damien realized he couldn't remember the last time he had simply sat still without working, thinking, or planning. "Tell me about Sterling and Associates," he said eventually. Ruby was quiet for so long that he wondered if she would answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was carefully controlled. "I built the strategic communications department from nothing. Spent 3 years developing relationships, creating systems, and building a reputation for handling complex corporate challenges." She paused, staring out at the lake. "My business partner was also my fiancé. When a major client offered us an exclusive contract that would have made the company extremely profitable, he accepted it without consulting me. That doesn't sound unreasonable. The client was a pharmaceutical company that wanted us to help them suppress negative information about dangerous side effects in one of their medications. People were getting seriously ill, and they wanted to manage the story instead of addressing the problem." Ruby's voice tightened. "I refused to take the contract. He overruled me and took it anyway." Damien understood immediately. "No. You couldn't stay. I couldn't compromise my principles, and I couldn't trust someone who would make decisions that fundamental." Without discussing them with me, Ruby turned to look at him directly. "So I walked away from everything I had built. The company, the relationship, the life I thought I wanted. That must have been difficult. It was devastating. But it taught me that integrity matters more than success, and that the right opportunity will come along if you're patient enough to wait for it." Ruby's smile was soft but genuine. "Working for you has reminded me how much I enjoy strategic problem solving when it's for someone I respect." The admission hung in the air between them, carrying implications that went beyond professional appreciation. Damien felt something shift in his chest, recognition that his feelings for Ruby had evolved far beyond employer and employee. "Ruby," he began, then stopped, uncertain how to articulate what he was feeling. "We should probably get some sleep," she said gently. "Tomorrow's going to be intense." But neither of them moved from the porch, both reluctant to break the spell of the evening. The intimacy of shared stories and mountain silence had created something fragile and precious between them. "Thank you, Damien," said finally, "for bringing me here. For everything." "You're welcome." Sunday morning dawned clear and bright, the lake reflecting the surrounding mountains like a perfect mirror. Ruby woke early and prepared coffee on the cabin's old-fashioned stove, familiar ritual grounding her for the day ahead. She found Damien already awake, sitting on the porch with his laptop. But his attention was focused on the scenery rather than the screen. "Sleep well?" she asked, offering him a mug of coffee. "Better than I have in months." "You were right about needing perspective." He accepted the coffee gratefully, noting that she had somehow remembered exactly how he preferred it prepared. "Been thinking about the presentation approach, and instead of trying to defend against the leak or minimize its impact, we should use it to our advantage." Damien's voice carried the confidence Ruby recognized from his best strategic thinking. "The story positions us as a company significant enough to attract major international investment. That's not something to apologize for. It's something to leverage." Ruby settled into the chair beside him, her own coffee warming her hands in the cool mountain air. "Tell me more." We framed the presentation around the question of readiness, rather than capability. "The Europeans aren't wondering if we can deliver results. The leak proved we're generating serious interest from sophisticated investors. They're wondering if we're ready for the level of growth and scrutiny that comes with international expansion. So instead of convincing them to choose us, we convince them we're choosing them." "Exactly. We present our vision, our standards, and our expectations for partners, We make them prove they're ready for cross-tech rather than the other way around. Damien's excitement was building as the strategy solidified. The leak becomes evidence of our market position rather than a liability. Ruby smiled, recognizing the brilliant reversal of perspective that made Damien such a formidable business strategist. That's going to require completely restructuring the presentation materials, which is why we're here instead of in Manhattan. Trying to manage 17 different opinions about crisis response, Damien stood up, his energy focused and purposeful. Can you set up the workspace while I call Trevor with the new approach? What followed was one of the most productive and creatively satisfying days of Ruby's professional life. Working together in the cabin's main room, completely reimagined cross-text presentation strategy, crafting materials that were confident, visionary, and strategically aggressive rather than defensive. Ruby's marketing background and Damien's strategic vision complemented each other perfectly. She understood how to tell compelling stories that engaged audiences emotionally while he provided the substantive content that demonstrated real value. Together, they created a presentation that was both inspiring and rigorous. The financial projections section needs more narrative structure, Ruby observed during their afternoon review. The numbers are impressive, but they need context that helps the audience understand the growth story. What kind of context? The journey, where cross-tech started, the key decisions that drove growth, and the vision that will sustain expansion. Ruby pulled up the relevant slides on her laptop. Investors don't just buy into current performance, they buy into leadership's ability to navigate future challenges. Damien watched as she restructured the financial section, weaving together data points with strategic narratives that made the numbers meaningful rather than just impressive. Her ability to see both details and big picture simultaneously continued to amaze him. You're remarkable at this, he said quietly. Ruby looked up from her computer, something in his tone catching her attention. At what, all of it? Strategic thinking, creative problem solving, understanding what audiences need to hear? He paused, meeting her eyes directly. I've never worked with anyone who complements my abilities so naturally. Good partnerships are rare. This feels like more than just a good partnership. The admission hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither had directly addressed. Ruby felt her heart rate increase as she recognized the shift in their dynamic from professional appreciation to something more personal and vulnerable. Damien, I know our relationship is supposed to be professional. I know you work for me, and that creates complications. His voice was quiet but steady. But I also know that what I feel for you goes beyond professional respect. Ruby set down her coffee mug, her hands slightly unsteady. What are you saying? I'm saying that somewhere between your first day and right now, you became the most important person in my life. I'm saying that I trust you with things I've never trusted anyone with. And I'm saying that I'm falling in love with you, even though I have no idea how to navigate that while maintaining a professional relationship. The honesty in his confession took Ruby's breath away. She had felt the growing connection between them but hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge its depth or implications. Hearing Damien articulate what she had been trying to deny forced her to confront her own feelings. This is complicated, she said softly. Everything worthwhile is complicated. I work for you. There are power dynamics and professional boundaries. And none of that changes how I feel about you or how you make me want to be a better person. Damien moved closer, his voice gentle but determined. I'm not asking you to compromise your principles or your professional integrity. Asking you to consider the possibility that what we have together is worth figuring out the complications. Looked into his blue eyes, seeing vulnerability and hope, alongside the determination that had built his empire. This was Damien without his armor, without his defenses, offering her something precious and fragile. I care about you too, she admitted quietly. More than I should, more than is probably wise. Then we'll figure out the rest together. When he kissed her, it felt like the most natural thing in the world, the culmination of weeks of growing intimacy and understanding. Ruby realized that somewhere in the process of managing his professional life, she had fallen completely in love with the man behind the corporate success. Chapter 14, Monday. Morning's presentation was a masterpiece of strategic communication. Damien and Ruby arrived at Crosstech's offices early, their materials polished and their confidence unshakable. The European investment team, led by Dr. Elizabeth Hoffman and accompanied by 4 senior analysts, represented exactly the caliber. of sophisticated international partners CrossTech needed for global expansion. Before we begin, Damien announced as the meeting convened in the main conference room. I want to address the information that appeared in the media over the weekend. Dr. Hoffman's expression was carefully neutral. We appreciate your directness, Mr. Cross. The leak was unfortunate but not entirely surprising. CrossTech has reached a level of success that generates significant interest from investors, competitors, and media outlets. Damien's tone was confident rather than defensive. What matters is not that people are talking about our opportunities, but that we choose our partners carefully and strategically. Ruby watched from her position near the presentation controls, noting how the European team responded to Damien's approach. Instead of appearing defensive or apologetic, CrossTech was positioning itself as a company with options and standards. Today's presentation will demonstrate our technology, our capabilities, and our vision for international expansion, Damien continued. But more importantly, it will outline our expectations for partners who want to be part of CrossTech's future. What followed was 90 minutes of perfectly orchestrated strategic storytelling. Ruby managed the technical aspects seamlessly while Damien presented their vision with passion and precision. The materials they had crafted in the mountains transformed complex business, got information into a compelling narrative about innovation, growth, and partnership. The European team asked sophisticated questions that demonstrated genuine interest. In serious consideration, Dr. Hoffman, in particular, seemed impressed by the depth of CrossTech strategic planning and the confidence of their expansion vision. Your approach to international markets is more comprehensive than we anticipated, she observed during the technology demonstration. In most American companies, our size focus primarily on domestic growth with international expansion as a secondary consideration. CrossTech was conceived as a global company from the beginning, Damien replied. We've been preparing for international expansion since our second year of operations. This partnership opportunity represents the right timing rather than a reactive strategy. During the break, Dr. Hoffman approached Ruby directly, a conversation that had been subtly orchestrated by both women throughout the morning. Miss Sinclair, your coordination of this presentation has been exceptional. The integration of technical and strategic elements is quite sophisticated. Thank you, Dr. Hoffman. Mr. Cross and I work very effectively together, so I've observed. Your backgrounds complement each other well. His vision and your execution create a powerful combination. Dr. Hoffman's tone was thoughtful. Our experience? Successful international partnerships require leadership teams that can operate seamlessly across different business cultures and operational demands. Ruby understood the subtext. The European team was evaluating not just CrossTech's technology and financials, but the quality and compatibility of its leadership. Her role in the presentation had demonstrated organizational capabilities that went beyond typical executive assistant functions. When the meeting reconvened, the final section focused on partnership structure and operational integration. Damien presented CrossTech's requirements and expectations with the same confidence he had applied to their capabilities, making it clear that any partnership would need to meet their standards for operational excellence and strategic vision. We're looking for partners who share our commitment to innovation and quality, he concluded. CrossTech's international expansion will be successful because we choose our partnerships carefully, not because we accept any available opportunity. After the European team departed, Ruby and Damien found themselves alone in the conference room, surrounded by presentation materials and the aftermath of their most important business meeting. That was incredible, Trevor announced as he rejoined them. They were impressed, engaged, and definitely interested. Dr. Hoffman asked for detailed financial projections and operational timelines. What's the next step? Ruby asked. Spend the rest of the week evaluating our materials and conducting their own market analysis. We should have a preliminary decision by Friday. Trevor's excitement was evident. If they move forward, we're looking at partnership negotiations that could transform CrossTech completely. As Trevor left to coordinate follow-up materials, Ruby and Damien remained in the conference room. The success of the morning mixing with the personal conversation from the previous evening. We did it, Damien said quietly. You did it. Brilliant strategic positioning. We did it together. The presentation worked because of your insights and your ability to structure the narrative. Damien moved closer to her, his voice dropping to intimate tones. Everything works better when we do it together. Ruby felt the same magnetic pull that had led to their kiss at the cabin. But the corporate setting made her acutely aware of the professional complications they needed to navigate. "Damien, about yesterday, no regrets," he said firmly. "Whatever. We need to figure out professionally. I'm not taking back anything I said or felt. The Europeans were evaluating us as a team. If this partnership moves forward, there will be increased scrutiny of everyone in leadership positions. Are you concerned about your position here? I'm concerned about maintaining professional credibility while figuring out what this means for us personally." Ruby gestured around the conference room. "This is your world, your company, your reputation. I don't want to complicate things that are important to you." Damien stepped closer, his expression serious but tender. "Ruby, you are what's important. To me, the company, the deals, the success, none of it means anything if I can't share it with someone who matters." The sincerity in his voice made her heart ache with possibility and fear simultaneously. "So what do? We take it one day at a time? We continue working together because we're exceptional at it. We explore what's happening between us because it's too important to ignore." Damien's smile was soft but determined. "Unless you're planning to quit on me too. Not going anywhere," Ruby said. "I'm in it completely." Epilogue. 6 months later, the Crosstech European partnership had exceeded everyone's expectations. The company's international expansion was proceeding ahead of schedule. Their technology had been successfully implemented across 12 countries. The financial returns had surpassed even Damien's optimistic projections. More importantly, the partnership had elevated Crosstech's reputation and operational capabilities to genuine global status. They were no longer just a successful American tech company. They were a major international player with the resources and relationships to compete at the highest levels. Ruby had been promoted to Director of Strategic Operations, a position that recognized her contributions to the company's growth while providing appropriate professional standing. For her relationship with Damien, the transition had been managed carefully. With input from Sofia Chen Martinez and approval from the board of directors, ensuring that both professional and personal boundaries were maintained appropriately. The Tokyo expansion meeting went well, Ruby reported as she entered Damien's office on a Thursday afternoon in late fall. "They're enthusiastic about implementing our systems and the timeline looks manageable. Any concerns about cultural integration? It's nothing we haven't handled before. I'll coordinate with their local team next week to ensure smooth implementation." Ruby settled into the chair across from his desk, her professional demeanor shifting slightly as she smiled at him. "How was your lunch with your mother?" "Productive. She's planning a holiday party and wants to invite half of Manhattan." Damien's expression was fond rather than exasperated. "She also asked about our Christmas plans?" "Our Christmas plans?" "Apparently, she assumes we'll be spending the holidays together. She may have mentioned something about it being time to make things official." Ruby laughed, recognizing Helena's none-too-subtle matchmaking instincts. "And what did you tell her?" "That I'd discuss it with the most important person in my life and get back to her." The casual way he referred to her as the most important person in his life still made Ruby's heart skip, even after 6 months of hearing similar sentiments. Their relationship had developed slowly and carefully, balancing professional responsibilities with personal feelings. But it had grown stronger and more meaningful with each passing week. "I think official sounds nice," Ruby said softly. Damien looked up from his computer, his full attention focused on her in the way that never failed to make her feel like the center of his universe. "Official as in meeting family expectations, or official as in something more significant?" "Official as in I love you and I want to build a life with you, complications and all." The smile that spread across his face was radiant with joy and relief. Damien stood up and moved around his desk, pulling Ruby into his arms with the easy intimacy that had developed between them. "I love you too," he said against her hair. "More than I thought I was capable of loving anyone. Even when I reorganize. Your filing systems without permission? Especially then?" As they kissed in his office overlooking Manhattan, Ruby reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought them together. She had walked into Crosstech Industries looking for a temporary job and found instead a partnership that had transformed both their professional and personal lives. Damien said as they separated, his arms still around her waist, ready to help me figure out how to propose properly. "I thought you'd never ask. I'm asking now." "Then yes, I'm ready." Should warn you, I have very specific ideas about engagement rings and romantic proposals. I wouldn't expect anything less from the woman who revolutionized my entire life." Damien's expression was tender and grateful. "Thank you, Ruby, for everything. Thank you for being worth the complicated professional boundaries and impossible standards. I'm still impossible? Absolutely. But you're my impossible, and that makes all the difference." As they returned to their respective work, Ruby realized that she had found something she hadn't even known she was looking for, a partnership that challenged and supported her professionally, while providing the personal connection she had always craved. Damien Cross had been looking for an assistant who could manage his professional life, and instead, he had found a partner who could share his entire world. Some of the best things in life, Ruby thought, came disguised as professional opportunities. And some of the most important relationships began with a woman walking into a CEO's office with messy hair and the attitude to match his impossible standards. Outside the windows of Crosstech Industries, Manhattan sparkled in the afternoon sun, full of possibilities and new beginnings. Inside, two people who had found love in the most unlikely circumstances continued building an empire together. One strategic decision and one shared moment at a time. The end.